On the 17th of January 1961, Patrice Lumumba, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, was assassinated. Described as one of the most significant assassinations in modern African history, this heinous crime is widely believed to have been the fruit of two interrelated conspiracies which were led by the US and Belgian governments. To truly appreciate the historical importance of Lumumba's death, it is important to understand three things. 1. The global context in which the assassination took place. 2. Lumumba's status as a revolutionary nationalist leader. And 3. The long-term impact of his death on Congolese politics. From the late 1800s to the early 1990s, the US and Belgium were arguably two of the most important external forces in the shaping of Congo's destiny. From as early as 7 months before the infamous Berlin Conference of 1884, in which European powers gathered to divide and allocate various African regions to themselves, the US was the first world power to formally recognize the ownership claims made by Belgium's King Leopold II to the territories of the Congo Basin. In 1885, King Leopold established what was then known as the Congo Free State, which he would rule in his own personal capacity, completely separate from his role as the constitutional head of the Belgian government. King Leopold and his men would go on to...
and basically what that meant is King Leopold personally owned the Congo. The Congo is a country that's about 30 times bigger than his country, Belgium. But he didn't run the Congo as the head of Belgium. You know, he wasn't the head of the Congo. He personally owned the Congo, just like you own your car, just like you own the food that you bought from the grocery store, just like you own your cups, just like you own your cigarette lighters. He owned it personally. A country that was 30 times bigger than his own. It was his personal property. And Patrice Lumumba was assassinated by the United States and Belgium simply because they didn't like him. You know, they didn't like him because he was going to kick the Europeans out of the Congo. Once they got their independence, he didn't want them to stick around and assist them in their freedom. Belgium felt like the Congo shouldn't be freed immediately. They felt like the Congo should to be independent in small steps. They should gradually work their way to independence because they thought that the Congolese have never known freedom before, so they just wanted to help them in their freedom. They wanted to assist, but in reality they wanted to play the background and have control. But Lumumba was going to kick them out, so they killed him. And I think this is very important because a lot of African history is unknown to black people in America, and this is why there's such a disconnect between us. But let's listen.
Of the newly independent Congo, he was faced with an army revolt, and secessionist rebel groups from Congo's mineral-rich provinces began to wreak havoc on the country. Belgium sent in troops supposedly to protect Belgian nationals living in the Congo, but it was widely believed that the Belgian troops were actually working to strengthen the rebels. Lumumba appealed to the United Nations to expel the Belgians and deploy UN peacekeeping troops to help repress the rebels. But with the United Nations unwilling to act quickly to help suppress the rebels, Lumumba appealed to the Soviet Union for military equipment to assist his troops in their fight to restore internal order. This move would set the Western powers into panic mode, and the CIA, MI6, and Belgian security operatives would all allegedly begin plotting to bring an end to his premiership.
Alright, so let me recap. Patrice Lumumba, as soon as he became president of the Congo, a week later, his own military began to rebel against him. So Belgium, the country that used to own the Congo, sent in troops to protect the white Belgians that still lived in the Congo. But apparently, through documents that have just been released, what actually happened is the Belgians and the Americans and the British staged an army revolt. They paid the army off to rebel. That way, it would draw a response from the Belgians. That way, the Belgian military can come in and keep the peace, which really means take over. And they knew that Patrice Lumumba would reach out to the United Nations and the United States for help. The United States knew this, and they rejected him. They said, we're not going to help you. And they knew his last option was to reach out to the Soviet Union, the communists. Patrice Lumumba was not a communist. He didn't love Russia. He just felt like, hey, my country is brand new, and there's all this chaos going on. There's a revolt. I need somebody to give me weapons and military equipment so that I can get my country stabilized. And this was their conspiracy to kill him.
In their bid to get rid of him and all that he stood for, the American and Belgian governments are believed to have conspired to deploy all the tools and resources at their disposal, including the United Nations Secretariat under Dag Hammarskjöld and Ralph Bunche, to buy the support of Lumumba's Congolese rivals. Within just under 7 months after the country gained independence from Belgium and his appointment as the country's first prime minister, Patrice Lumumba was seized and executed by Belgian and Congolese operatives of the newly installed military government led by the infamous Mobutu Sese Seko, a government whose entry into power is believed to have been backed by the US and Belgian governments, acting in collaboration with key UN officials. The execution was swift but brutal. Lumumba, along with 2 of his associates, Maurice Umpolo and Joseph Okito, were lined up against a tree and shot one at a time. The execution is believed to have taken place on the 17th of January 1961 at around 9:40 p.m. The full details of how the bodies were disposed of are simply too shocking to be described in this video.
He was dissolved in acid.
Lumumba eliminated, the Mobutu regime would go on to pay nothing more than lip service to the ideals of national unity, economic independence, and Pan-African solidarity, which have been championed by Lumumba, shattering the hopes and aspirations of the millions of Congolese who had placed their faith in the great leader, error, and financial mismanagement that would plague the country for years to come. Due to his relatively short political career, the full impact of Lumumba's legacy could be rather hard to fully quantify. His death in 1961 was seen as a huge blow to African nationalist movements at the time, but it ultimately fanned the fire amongst other African revolutionaries to continue in their fight against imperialism. Numerous historians have also cited his death as a major contributing factor to the radicalization of the American civil rights movement in the 1960s. And even till today, Patrice Lumumba continues to be revered as a symbolic representation of the Pan-African struggle for liberation. And
Rest in peace, my brother. Your struggle, your challenges, and everything that you went through will never be forgotten.